Thank you everyone for joining the webinar today. My name is Michael Hansen, Program Manager with the Action Innovation Network. Action is a collaborative network of technology business incubators and other entrepreneurship support organizations located throughout the New England region. Our network supports startups developing technologies across a wide range of tech industry sectors, including life sciences, clean tech, blue tech, robotics, and advanced materials. Our Plymouth Rock project provides a suite of resources for international startups that are interested in exploring this innovation ecosystem as a place to grow their business in the US. Please submit your questions using the chat window anytime during the presentation. There will also be time for questions at the end. The webinar will be recorded and emailed to you and also posted on our website. Today's webinar is presented by Jean Leclerc, Director of Business Development at the Massachusetts Life Sciences Center. In this role, Jean develops and executes strategies to enhance life sciences job growth in the Commonwealth by building relationships with key industry stakeholders, prospective partners, and public agencies. Prior to joining the Massachusetts Life Sciences Center, Jean served as the Economic Development Director for the Gateway Hilltown Collaborative, a pilot program unifying community development efforts in 6 towns in Western Massachusetts. You can view her complete bio on the event webpage. Jean, thank you very much for joining us today. We look forward to your presentation.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me. Welcome everyone. Thanks for coming to this. So as Michael said, I'm the Director of Business Development at the Mass Life Sciences Center. So I'll just briefly review with you in case you haven't heard of it, what that is. MLSC, or the center, is a quasi-public agency. So we're not fully an arm of the state government, but we do work very closely with several public agencies, as well as nonprofits and other entities that serve the life sciences sector here in Massachusetts. All of our funding programs are taxpayer dollars, and we strive to use them wisely, but that's one of the reasons why a lot of our programs have very strict guidelines and strict eligibility, which I'll get into. But if you are a startup or a company looking to potentially take advantage of some of these programs, which we hope you do, it is worth reaching out to just sort of verify your eligibility and make sure that I can answer any questions for you. All right. I'm hearing just a little bit of noise somewhere, but I'm the host, so I think I can mute you guys. Oh, went away. Good job. Okay, so Massachusetts, as again, maybe some of you know, is a really great place for life sciences. And that's not just Boston, Cambridge, that's the entire Commonwealth for a variety of reasons. For one, it has been the center of a significant amount of biotech growth within the last 10 years. We have about 18 of the 20 largest biotech and pharma companies in the world having some presence here. We have 50 plus local universities and world-class research hospitals, and this contributes a lot to the dynamism of the ecosystem itself. It's not something that would sustain itself just on the backs of companies alone and private investment, but it's that public investment as well, our excellent public school system, our feeder programs from community colleges, our attention to vocational education. There's a lot of really, really great factors that already exist within the Commonwealth that are contributing to this robust sector and the growth of these corporations. We are #1 for industry investment in R&D. A lot of these numbers, particularly if you look at per capita, we are far and above. Some of our competitors are like states of California, North Carolina, Texas, that have put a lot of money into their tax incentive programs to try to incentivize companies to move to their state and expand within their state. But on a per capita basis, we have the highest educated workforce. We have the highest amount of venture capital funding. We're definitely the center in a lot of ways. And there's a really high density of support and resources here in the Commonwealth. And we think that that's usually one of our strongest pitches for companies growing here and hiring here. We also have some awards about being the #1 most innovative state. Pardon me if this sounds at the beginning like a commercial for Massachusetts, but I'm very proud of us. We've done a lot to make it so. The venture capital investment is a big piece that particularly startups who are looking to locate in the US for the first time, if they're international, that capital investment piece is a really important factor. The ability to fundraise within the state, not just because of the amount of capital, but we have really smart capital. The venture firms that are engaged in life sciences and biotech and med tech really know what they're doing. They've made some really smart calls, and they're always looking for cutting edge technologies, things that are innovative, things that might be risky, because they've seen and they've learned over the years and the decades that those are the technologies that pay off in the end. Those are the technologies that are really contributing the most in the end to saving the world in various ways. I'll come back to Moderna, but that's one of our favorite examples. So within Massachusetts, we have a lot of different entities that are all working in some capacity to serve the life sciences sector, not just to expand it and hire, but also to enrich and make sure that the resources that any company needs to survive and expand are here and that they have access to them, that it's not about luring anybody here and then sort of saying, good luck, you're on your own. We wish you the best. The Mass Office of Business Development is a really great resource for helping find space if a company is looking to expand within the Commonwealth. We love to see companies looking outside of Boston, Cambridge, and from a financial perspective, I'm not sure if you're aware, it's very expensive to be in Boston, Cambridge. So for a lot of companies that are looking to expand, particularly their manufacturing presence, in a lot of cases, we're looking at local real estate tax incentives in the Worcester area, in Western Massachusetts, and even further. Sorry. Mass Bio is a really great nonprofit, actually. They're a really helpful resource because they are in no way a public agency. So they have a little bit of extra freedom to recommend particular vendors. They also have a really great shared equipment purchasing program. They have contractors with lots of large suppliers, including Thermo Fisher. So if you're a small company, 15 employees, and you need a big piece of equipment, if you're a member of Mass Bio, then you're getting the same price as Novartis would be. So that's a really helpful asset in terms of, again, helping startups grow. It's not just about serving the massive global corporations that are already leading in the space here, but it's about making sure that that ecosystem has a constant sort of grassroots, healthy environment for those companies to grow as well and compete. I won't go through each and every one of these logos here, but suffice it to say that if you need help solving any problem that your company is facing, there's probably an entity that already exists in order to help you solve it, whether it's space, fundraising, equipment purchasing, talent. We're all pretty much here for you. And I'll come back to this idea, but we do have a group of us that we refer to as Team Massachusetts that's representatives from several of these entities, and our sort of agreement with each other is that if someone calls us, they sort of call all of us. So any lead that we have, any company that has asked us a question, we immediately relay it to our other partners in these entities to make sure that if they have an additional resource, if they've worked with someone in the town that this company is looking to go to, if they have a connection with venture capital in some capacity that's interested in that particular space, it's all connected. So none of us are siloed. And I think that's what's really great in particular about working in this ecosystem, is that it is very collaborative. And just a heads up, as Michael mentioned, I do have the chat window open. So if anyone, I feel like I'm going through a lot and there's a lot of details and sometimes I talk fast. So if you have questions as I go, please feel free to drop them in the chat. I'm pretty good at multitasking, so we'll see how that goes. Okay, we have about 12 different funding programs running at any given time. And at MLSC, our main measure of success is creating high quality jobs within the life sciences sector. So every few years, I think we have one coming up in 2023, the Mass Life Sciences Center needs to be reauthorized by the legislature and the governor's office. So in order to make the case for our existence and the wise investment of the funds and the taxpayer dollars that we're entrusted with, our job is not just to create jobs, but to sort of ensure the health of the ecosystem in general, the life sciences ecosystem. So our funding programs are not just about creating as many jobs as possible. They're really about creating jobs that last, and in addition, really supporting the ecosystem by supporting innovative ideas, again, ideas that might be risky, that might have a harder time finding other kinds of funding, but that we know because of our expertise in the industry, our science knowledge, that we're aware that these are the technologies that really need investment because of their potential. So for this past year, we had several focus areas. So any projects that came through our door for any of our funding programs, if they were targeting cell and gene therapy, novel modalities, women's health, data science, COVID-19, CNS, that's central nervous system, diseases, treatments, bugs as drugs, perhaps a phrase you've heard. Any of those topics that popped up in applications sort of got an extra look. And we do that every year in partnership with industry, because we're having conversations with companies all the time. But also from input from our partners in research institutions and universities, really trying to understand what the ecosystem needs and what it would benefit from that maybe the market is not already providing. So any incentives that we could figure out how to coordinate for anybody operating a large cell and gene therapy manufacturing operation. We're always very interested in manufacturing jobs specifically, particularly because within the life sciences, biopharma specifically, those jobs are relatively high paying. And we do have existing training feeder programs, partnerships with not only universities, but also community colleges. And so we see that as a really exciting way to sort of expand access and sort of improve equity within the space. Life sciences sometimes has a challenge in that area because a lot of it needs so much education and so much very specialized training and experience. So by partnering with community colleges and in many ways tailoring their training programs and focusing on these particular areas, we're sort of contributing to the ecosystem itself through public funding, but also making sure that residents within the Commonwealth are benefiting from that by being hired as well, and not just within Boston, Cambridge. So the two largest programs that are usually of most interest to companies that are not already in Massachusetts are our tax incentive program, for one. So you'll hear this number a lot. It's kind of our going rate. $15,000 per job is our refundable tax incentive amount. So if you are already in the state of Massachusetts and you are going to hire at least 10 people in the coming year, you would apply for our tax incentive program and say, I'm going to hire 10 people. We ask, what are you doing with those 10 people? And if you say one of these things, cell and gene therapy, or women's health or data science, we smile upon that application and we might award you $15,000 times 10, so $150,000. And that is applied to your Massachusetts tax liability. However, it's very cool because it is refundable. So if you end up having no tax liability at the end of the year, it's just a check for $150,000. The catch is that those jobs need to last for 5 years. So every year you report on your head count. It doesn't have to be those exact jobs, but your head count has to stay level or grow. So every year you report on that, and there's not a stiff penalty for missing it other than that you have to return a prorated amount of the funds that you collected for those employees if your head count drops below the original amount. This is the part where if you're a company in this case and you feel like this is a program that you would love to take advantage of, please reach out and I can walk you through some of the nitty-gritty pieces of this. But the goal is to incentivize quality job growth, long-term jobs, particularly outside of Boston, Cambridge, and particularly in these focus areas that I mentioned. It is a competitive program, so every year it's oversubscribed, and this year the deadline falls in early February, so usually you apply in December, January for the upcoming year. You're making a guess about what your hiring is going to be, and then you report on that at the end of the year when you file your taxes. So that's the timeline for it. We had no idea what was going to happen this year in 2020 with the pandemic. We didn't know if that was going to hamper a lot of people's hiring plans, and in many cases it did. But over and above, we had the most applications we've ever had this year and the highest request for funds. So this was a very tight competitive year, and we are currently in the process of evaluating those applications. And I will go ahead and say that it's fun, but it is hard. It's really interesting and exciting to hear what everyone's working on, what their hiring plans are. But we were really surprised in a good way that the hiring was actually so robust, not only last year, but also people are foreseeing some really strong hiring for this year. So then MassTag, that stands for the Massachusetts Transition and Growth Program. So that is targeted specifically at companies that have no existing Massachusetts presence. So that's really our program that we're trying to use to attract new companies to come to Massachusetts. So the deal is you have to create 10 jobs within your first 12 months. And then it's that same $15,000 per job number. The only difference is that that program pays out, the jobs have to stick around for 3 years, and we pay out every year based on the number of people you've actually hired that year. So you have to be able to hit that 10 target, but if you come close, there's still a way to make it even out over the remaining 3 years. But again, so if you're a company outside of Massachusetts looking to potentially locate to Massachusetts, what might happen is if you're going to hire at least 10 people in 12 months, you would start by applying to MassTag, which I will tell you is a much less competitive program. I will also tell you I am the singular administrator and program manager of that program. So please do reach out if you have questions, or again, if you're focusing on any of these focus areas that I mentioned, we're definitely interested in talking to you. You would start by applying to MassTag, you'd probably be accepted. And then in following years, you would reapply to the tax incentive program because now you're already here. So you've kind of graduated to the tax incentive program, but it's the same dollar figure of support every year. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions in the chat, which is great. Again, don't hesitate to reach out to me after this if you have any, if you fall into this category. And just a quick summary at the bottom, the goal of these programs specifically, again, because it's taxpayer dollars, is not only to create the jobs within the Commonwealth, but also to build that innovation infrastructure that through the decades of the growth of this sector, that's what we've seen really contribute to its strength in the future. We are always interested in helping small companies. A lot of companies that do apply particularly to the tax incentive program are large. Some of them are hiring a couple hundred people, but the vast majority of the companies that we support through our programs are hiring between 10 and 20 people. So that's kind of our sweet spot. But we also have some other programs that target smaller companies. We have a seed fund program. We have a program that specifically targets hiring data analysts. One of the things we've heard from the industry, from companies that we talk to, is that it can be really hard to hire data scientists in Massachusetts, particularly because there's so much competition for them at everywhere else, Google, the financial industry, etc. And they generally tend to pay better for those data scientists. So it can be hard to retain, we heard, that particular kind of talent. So we have a program particularly focused on incentivizing and subsidizing the hiring of data scientists and the training of data scientists out of college, out of grad programs, PhDs, with the intention of getting those people interested in the life sciences sector and getting them already involved and sort of within the ecosystem so that they're less likely to leave for a potentially simply a higher salary offer, but then maybe if they're already invested in the work, that they're more likely to stick around. And then, as I mentioned, any time that we can strengthen the existing connections within the industry, within the ecosystem, and also generate a diverse talent base, not only in the jobs that are being created, but also in leadership positions at these companies, we love to incentivize that. So throughout our programs, there are some running themes of not only these particular industry focus areas, but attention to equity, attention to diversity, access. We love to contribute and support companies that are obviously committed to those goals. And we think that that is exactly the kind of thing that also does benefit the Commonwealth as a whole, rather than simply incentivizing large companies, creating as many jobs as possible wherever they may land. But if we can be a little bit strategic about where those jobs are and where these companies are investing those dollars and the people that are benefiting, then we think that that helps the ecosystem overall in the long term. And that's ultimately our goal. The tax incentive review, I'll sort of go over this briefly, but just in case you're in this category, if you're just interested in how we evaluate these applications, I mentioned it was competitive and we don't fund everyone, though often we would like to. We're looking at geography. That's a big piece of it. These circles and bubbles aren't necessarily perfectly representative about how much weight we put in each one, and it's a little bit sometimes more of an art than a science, trying to make all the pieces fit together. But we are very interested in the geography of where we're incentivizing growth. That's a big part of making sure that the entire Commonwealth is benefiting, and that, again, it's not just concentrated in Boston, Cambridge, though Boston, Cambridge has a lot of great assets to offer, and it's certainly worth exploring if you're a company that's looking particularly for that kind of networking and capital investment right off the bat. But all of those resources also exist in Greater Worcester, in Greater Springfield. There's some really good corridors for life science growth that we're seeing. Your focus area, as I mentioned, cell and gene therapy, women's health, COVID-19 was certainly a focus last year. Maybe that's understandable. Project details, we're always interested in how exactly people are going to attain the goals that they set. So we are interested in the details. We do have a very involved board, and all of our applications do have to sort of be approved not only through the board, but also we have a strong partnership with the Executive Office of Housing and Economic Development. So we review a lot of our final awards through them, and if they have questions, it's kind of a collaborative. We come to an agreement, we come to a scenario that funds the companies that check as many of these boxes as possible, while also making sure that we're making the smartest investments possible to make sure that the ecosystem is strong into the future. Again, briefly, mass tag, I sort of reviewed the details of this already, but as an example, some recent ones in case you've heard of them, Lycan Bio, Fresenius, Northway Biotech. These are companies that were brought here on the mass tag program that were incentivized to come. They didn't have a Massachusetts presence already. And so far, we feel like it's going really well. They're meeting their hiring targets, and they're maintaining those jobs, and they're reporting out, and we still have a couple $1 million left to deploy in this program. So again, if you're a company outside of Massachusetts looking to hire 10 people in your first 12 months, this is a great program to take advantage of. A little bit deeper into those priorities I mentioned, just to understand what they are and to understand how they get set. We have so many conversations, again, with not only companies, but research institutions, other practitioners in the life sciences space, that we're always interested in hearing what people are looking for investment to support, what they can't find investment for, what they feel like is the most exciting science that's up and coming out of our world-class universities, wherever we can sort of play matchmaker or subsidize a really good idea that isn't finding the traction that we think it deserves, we're happy to. So advanced biomanufacturing has been on our priority list for a couple of years, and we've seen a lot of really great growth on that side of things. Again, because they're high paying jobs generally, and we have those training pipelines with the partnership with community colleges to make sure that people have access to those jobs, and so the companies don't have trouble finding people to work there. Cell and gene therapy related to advanced biomanufacturing. Microbiome is a really interesting space that we would love to see more work done in. So actually, I would say that's, apart from COVID-19 treatments, vaccines, responses in various kinds, microbiome has been one that I'm particularly interested in, because we actually don't have, we have a hard time finding companies that are working in that space. So it's something that we think is really exciting and that we think is worth incentivizing where we can find it. We have a couple of companies in our portfolio at this point. Finch is a really good one, working in Charlestown, I believe. But there's a lot of potential, we think, especially treating it as a novel modality for therapeutics, diagnostics. Yeah. Data science I mentioned, and data analysis in general is a big need in the sector, that economically speaking, those are good high paying jobs, and they also contribute a lot to the ecosystem itself. Women's health, we also would love to see more companies focusing on. In a lot of cases, it can be sort of a peripheral product that a company might have. It's in many cases, maybe they're products that are giving attention to women's health are in an earlier stage. So we have a lot of our investments in women's health right now tend to be smaller. We're always on the lookout for a company ready to move, for example, from phase 2 to phase 3 with some particular women's health innovation. And COVID-19, who knows how long this might be on our list. Hopefully not much longer, but realistically speaking, we might have a little while yet. Very excited to hear, though, in Massachusetts, April 19th, general public vaccination eligible. I marked it on my calendar. We love to sort of remember that these aren't just statistics. We love to look at the state overall and look at numbers of jobs and percentage of growth and dollars of investment, but it's worth remembering that not only is it about people and creating jobs for people and creating treatments and therapeutics that actually change people's lives, and getting the patients and practitioners what they need, but these companies themselves have really good stories to tell in many cases. Moderna, just one example. We first supported Moderna in 2011, back when messenger RNA was a little bit riskier, a little bit more of an innovative idea. And this was one that caught our eye, and the team said, this is a homegrown company. What they're doing is pretty exciting. It has the potential to sort of change the world in various ways. And it's fun looking back at their old applications and hearing them say things like, if we ever need a vaccine really quickly, like this, our process might work really well. And messenger RNA, I think it might really contribute to the effectiveness of any vaccine that we create, especially if it's for a novel disease that no one's seen before. It's just weird seeing all these like prescient bullet points of like, how did you know? So seeing ideas like that come to fruition and actually reach the people that need them is always very exciting. So there's other examples of this that haven't gotten as much press or featured as in a central role as Moderna has lately, but we are very proud of Moderna. And if you didn't see that quote, we have used this quote, I think, in every publicity material that we've printed or sent out digitally since. But the quote from their CEO saying Massachusetts is, I would argue, the only place where this could have been developed. Very proud. And as Massachusetts taxpayers, if you are, you should also feel proud because that was your money. I mentioned that we love looking at stats overall. So just in case that sounded as exciting to you as it did to me, this is a huge sector in Massachusetts. If you're not aware, it's pretty much the fastest growing and largest impact on the state's overall tax revenue from any one industry. And that's not just from the corporations paying taxes and payroll taxes from the employees, but also what these companies and those employees and all of this work additionally attracts in a peripheral way, all the vendors that serve them, the real estate that they purchase and need and expand into. It has a huge impact across the state. So I won't read all of these, but basically that the average salary in biopharmaceutical companies is about $147,000. And in many companies, it's higher than that. And so we love to see this payoff again for as many people within the Commonwealth as we can. We're not just trying to create jobs that pay really well in Boston, Cambridge. We love to see these companies expand deeper into the state where they can offer these salaries, where some places in some regions, this is far above the average salary that you would see in that region. What we also like about some of these jobs and these companies is that though we are incentivizing in many cases with taxpayer dollars, I will tell you overall each year we're we're planting the seeds of about $30 million, give or take. And we see that pay off come back to the state in these forms of taxes and payroll revenue, usually paying off within 3 years and sometimes sooner. So overall, since this whole program operation started in 2009, it has paid for itself many times over. A case that we look forward to making again in 2023 when we have to be reauthorized for these programs. But it's just, as far as tax incentives go, and I would say I come from an economic development background, not a science background. So I'm always very interested in tax incentive programs. I think some work and some don't. And I would say as far as bang for your buck and safe investments, there's a lot of really good data to support these particular tax incentives. These are exactly the kind of investments with public funds that the state should be looking to make, because from the payoff alone, it's been worth it. MedTech pays a little bit less, but again, I mean, it's good jobs and it pays a lot in payroll taxes. It generates a lot in income tax receipts. If anyone has questions about the specifics of this, I'm happy to get into them, but suffice it to say, it's just a huge entity that we're supporting in many ways, a tiny piece of, But the goal there is always to make sure that the ecosystem itself is growing, and that's what's generating all of this growth. It's not just, this isn't our tax incentive dollars paying off directly, but it is keeping the tree growing. I feel like I overused the word ecosystem, so I'm always looking for a different word. Some of the examples, just in case you've heard of any of these are companies that have sort of, Moderna, obviously, I already highlighted for you. But these are companies that have been through multiple of our programs and that we've sort of seen grow from very small to somewhat larger. And we love to see companies stack our programs. So if you apply to benefit from our data science funding program, we love to see companies apply then also for our tax incentive program and also hire interns from our program. Stacking them and sort of, again, collaborating with the other entities within the state is a way that we see investing in success paying off in the best possible way. So again, if you're a company looking at any of our programs, and I'm happy to go into any of these stories in more detail, but basically you can start small. It's always worth starting the relationship. It's always worth us understanding what your needs are so that we understand what's happening in the ecosystem, and also so that you know what resources might be out there, even if you're not in a position to take advantage of them yet. That as you grow, as long as you're aware that if you need interns, if you need data scientists, if you're looking for a partnership with a nonprofit of some sort, a hospital, a research institution, a university, we love to see that as well. I sort of mentioned our investments in education and workforce. It's a big part of not only the case for coming to Massachusetts, but also the kinds of investments that we feel like really pay off and pay great dividends to the taxpayers of Massachusetts, because it enriches the entire economic ecosystem of the region. There's that word ecosystem again. Oh. So we try and partner with as many colleges, universities as we can, but also there's this really cool, I have a really great colleague that manages all of this, Ryan, who is really focused also on high schools and middle schools and sort of encouraging STEM education wherever we can in those early years, so that we're sort of getting students interested and making sure that they're aware that this is a valid career path and that it can be very rewarding and that there's really good opportunity for it in the state. In a lot of ways, that means incentivizing or subsidizing or paying for equipment for high schools and middle schools. And again, we're really trying to spread that out throughout the state. In some cases, Greater Boston just has more schools and more people, so you'll see our funding number is the greatest in Greater Boston. But again, if you know of any high schools, middle schools in your area that you feel like maybe could use a boost in their STEM programs, we're happy to hear from you or hear from them and see if there's ways that we can help. A big piece of that funding is also professional development for teachers, to learn how to use that equipment, to create lesson plans, to collaborate and work with other teachers around the state that have done something similar with a similar age group. It's a really fun program, and we've seen a lot of students who started out in schools that were actually participating in this program, then move on to our colleges and community colleges with our training feeder programs and get jobs in the companies that we've incentivized to come to Massachusetts. There's a couple of really good stories like that are full circle, that are very validating for us. So I won't go through each of these, but basically, in case you weren't aware, Massachusetts has a really, really great public school system. There's always room to grow, and there's certainly ways we can improve things. And I do feel like certainly the last year has taught us all a lot about the importance of public education, and also infrastructure and teachers having the resources they need, and mental health support in schools, and all kinds of other funding challenges that we have. I'm not saying it's perfect, but on a competitive basis within the country, we're pretty good, especially in a per capita sense of residents with a college degree and advanced degrees. Internship programs, we have a few different ones in the state that are run by these different partner entities I mentioned. MOBD, Mass Office of Business Development, has several. We also have one that basically pays for 12 weeks of an intern's time. That's a rolling deadline. So if you're a company in Massachusetts, a life sciences company with less than 100 employees, we would love to hear from you. We have, I think we've had about 700 different companies host interns with overwhelmingly positive results, and many of those interns have ended up with long-term jobs at those companies. But the dollar figure can sometimes be really helpful, especially for smaller companies, closer to that 10 number I keep mentioning. It's about $8,000 for 12 weeks of an intern's time. And again, we pride ourselves on the partnerships with the educational institutions, including community colleges, to make sure that those are all accessible to as many people as possible. Going forward, as we sort of expand into this brave new world we're seeing post-pandemic, or even continuing mid-pandemic, investing in human capital, we think, is the most important facet of making sure that we maintain this life sciences ecosystem. We're certainly a hub for life sciences and biotech on the global stage, and we're proud of that, but it's not something that we feel like will just run itself forever. We are certainly seeing a lot of competition from other states. I mentioned California, I mentioned North Carolina, Texas. Last year, New Jersey actually came up with a huge funding program that is really designed to incentivize companies to come, but they don't have the same, none of these states we feel like have the same attention to the talent pool and the human capital that we are lucky to have in Massachusetts, but that we also feel like we need to continue to invest in order to make sure that that continues to be as strong an asset as it is. We're also looking to provide companies with the investment capital, infrastructure, and community support that they need. In a lot of cases, this really means small and mid-sized companies that we're focused on. In some cases, when you're looking to move again from that phase 2 to phase 3 growth expansion, it can be really hard to solve some of your maybe new logistical problems that you haven't had. And so we are there to make that as smooth as possible, to make sure that it isn't a barrier to your growth. And in many ways, if we can present some new solutions or opportunities you weren't aware of, that's our job, and we're happy to. Incentivizing innovation itself, again, risky technologies, things that might not right now be obviously great investments, but from a scientific basis, again, Moderna's case for messenger RNA, it's something that we understand has the potential to solve a lot of problems in the future and contribute to the ecosystem and create jobs, but also ultimately deliver better treatments and lower cost therapies to patients, which is our goal. Then those are the kinds of investments we're looking to make. So if you're a company looking to send in an application for any of our programs, really highlight what you're doing that's innovative and that might feel risky. We're not always only interested in the safest bets, because we've seen that actually what seems like the safest bet is not necessarily the job growth that lasts long term. Leading that convergence revolution as far as digital health, biopharma, medical devices, and engineering, making sure that these companies that are working on all these exciting things, what we have in Massachusetts is such a wealth of companies doing so many different exciting things, that making sure that they're all talking to each other as much as possible just amplifies that growth and amplifies the ideas that they're able to explore and the power with which they explore them. And that's the kind of thing that has created the ecosystem that we see now. And that's the kind of growth that we feel like makes for the best future for the Commonwealth in general. Team Massachusetts, I mentioned briefly. I just wanted to throw this slide up, and also because this deck is being shared afterward, don't feel like you have to scramble and write down these people's email addresses, though you're welcome to. When I mentioned that if you call one of us, you call all of us, this is the all of us that gets the first immediate call. So if your first need and first concern in terms of expanding or moving to Massachusetts is finding space, there are a couple different entities here. Mass Econ does a really great job. The Mass Office of Business Development sort of is a catch-all. And if your primary need is funding, or you're looking at tax incentives, job growth, then I'm probably your first call. And usually what happens is a company will call one of us, we'll have a preliminary conversation, and then if it seems like you have an immediate need to talk to the others, we can connect you directly. Or what happens a lot of times, and this is the funnest way I think, is to have a big old meeting with the whole team and the company looking to come in so that we can answer all the questions in one big 1 hour meeting. And then we sort of have our marching orders to go out and create usually an incentives package that's usually just a summary of all the things we went over, but it can be easier to digest later on and easier to share with company leadership than simply verbal sharing. But sharing that packet of, here's a location you could go to, here's how much tax incentive you could probably expect based on what you're doing, Here's a local university that already has the training program that would help you grow. Here's potential partners, and having that all in one document, we try to make it as easy as possible to say yes to Massachusetts. I'm seeing a good question in the chat about specific activities to promote the companies to locate outside of Boston, Cambridge. And have we ever considered a one-day showcase of resources in places like Gillette or Worcester Baseball Stadium? The answer is definitely. In the last year, pretty much everything has been virtual, and particularly in promoting our tax incentive program, I think part of the reason that we had such great response this year is because we did put a lot more energy into promoting it, particularly in the West. So we connected to the Economic Development Council, Economic Development Partners in Western Mass, the various planning commissions, and any economic development entity that I was aware of from my previous life in Western Mass. We tried to make sure that those invitations went out. If anyone has suggestions, though, on groups I should reach out to promote our future information sessions virtually, I am happy to consider that. In terms of in-person, yes, we are currently putting together with our marketing communications team our traveling roadshow that I am looking forward to leading, that will involve exactly that, essentially presenting all of these programs, not only to companies that are in a position to take advantage of them immediately, but companies that might be interested in simply knowing these are out there. Some of our best customers in Central Mass and Western Mass, and by customers, it's funny because it's people that we've given money to, not that have paid us. Our best customers are also some really good advocates. So we've had some companies apply because they happened to connect with an existing company that we already funded. So we do see a lot of information being shared that way, and that does help get the word out. But as I mentioned, please feel free to reach out and contact me if you have suggestions like that. I love the idea of Gillette Stadium and the Worcester Baseball Stadium. The Woo Sox, that's what we're calling them. Very excited about that post-pandemic. Yeah, so you'll see a traveling roadshow probably in 2022, particularly in Western Mass. I have a personal focus on Western Mass because my previous job was there, and a little piece of my heart will always be in Western Mass, in the Hilltown specifically. So I'll make sure that happens, and I feel like we're all pretty excited about this roadshow in general. And post-pandemic, I think you'll see, well, I don't know, from us at least, we're all pretty excited to get back out there and talk to people. We do these jobs because we like people, and we're enthusiastic about what we do, and we're excited about it. And it's always more fun to do that kind of thing in person and in new places across the state. This is always very fun too. Happy to do it virtually, but I think once we're able, you'll definitely see that happening. And actually that brings me to the end anyway. So I'm happy to answer any questions that haven't come up thus far, or if I can go into any more detail, or if you have a specific question about your specific situation, I'm happy to answer it, and maybe that'll be informative too. Oh, Michael, you're on mute. Oh, do I have to unmute you? Because I'm the host, maybe? Ask. Oh, I asked you.
Okay. Thank you, Jean, for that very informative presentation. Are there any questions for Jean? Jean, could you give a few examples of the 10 different tax incentives that you mentioned on that slide?
Oh, I didn't mute myself. Good. Yes, totally. So there's different ways to take advantage of the tax incentive program, particularly. So you can apply it to the research tax credit. You can apply it. There's some different particular ways that essentially influence the percentage that you're taking advantage of every year of certain kinds of investments, either in investing in your building or purchasing equipment or hiring. So it really does just depend on the different situation that each company is in. Was that your question, Michael, or was it more about the other programs as well?
Yes, that was the focus of that question. And then with the mass tag incentive, what is considered the beginning of operations that begins that 12-month time frame?
Totally. So we've gotten more flexible about it, honestly, which is a miracle because, as I said, taxpayer dollars, strict rules. So once you sign the agreement, it used to be sort of like as soon as you have a lease in place, as soon as you have a space secured, you're considered in Massachusetts. So we used to have to be a little bit strategic and creative and help these companies sort of line up those lease signing times and building purchase times to make sure that they were ready to hire pretty quickly after that. I mentioned that it's really about headcount. So what could happen sometimes is that in that first 12 months, you're hiring maybe more administrative folks, people overseeing construction or infrastructure, and then maybe you don't need those people anymore once the building is already constructed and you have your sales strategy in place, and now you're ready to hire some manufacturing employees. So you might hire 20 manufacturing employees in your second year, but those first 10 people you hired are gone. As long as the head count itself is still growing or maintaining, you're still getting the credit. So the time starts officially when you have a lease or a building. In some circumstances, though, we can make it start during the tax filing year. So if you're going to do all your hiring and most of your growth and investment in 2022 and you sign your lease in November 2021, we can put it in the agreement before we actually have ink on paper that it starts January 1st, 2022, instead of November when you actually had the lease. It's sort of like once you have people on the ground, once your actual operation, your project begins, we can use this project start date. But it has to be one of those two, either the beginning of the tax year or the day you sign the lease. So the worst situation for a company, for example, would be if they signed the lease February 1st of 2022, and we're going to do all our hiring in 2023 and didn't hire anybody February to December. That's a company we would put in that latter situation where we'd say, actually, this program is going to start January 2023, and you'll only get credit for the hires that you made in 2023. I know there's a lot of little details. If you're a company in any of these situations, our goal is for the companies to succeed. So if we have a way to make sure that you can check all the boxes and qualify, that's our job. We're not trying to get anybody.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. And you mentioned Moderna a few times. Interested, are there any examples that you're able to share about resources or collaborations that were available to that company that that contributed in some way to helping accelerate the vaccine development?
Oh, interesting. They've honestly
or production.
Yeah, no, of course. They certainly plugged into Team Massachusetts itself, and I think benefited from some space selection from Mass Econ in terms of manufacturing operations. They're definitely they have been participating in our internship program for years, long-term veterans of our internship program, which is great. Honestly, it sort of feels like in the last 6 to 12 months, they've like graduated from us. They're like too cool now. So it's hard to get updates as directly as we used to. It felt like we used to be really close, but it's nice. It's like seeing your child go off to college and stop talking to you as much, but it's fine. They definitely, the space selection I know Team Mass helped with and the internship program. I don't think we didn't facilitate any particular like university partnerships that they might have had or hospital partnerships. That would have been on their own, but if they had needed it, we could have provided it. I'm seeing a question. Feel free to make me follow up on that at any point if you'd like. I'm seeing a question in the chat about early stage companies. If their address is an incubator and they hire some people that sit at that incubator, if that counts for any of our programs, and it definitely does. Yeah, as long as you're in Massachusetts, it doesn't matter if your address is an incubator. And actually, again, incubators are another entity that we love to support because that's a key to sort of making sure the ecosystem is as strong as possible. And in a lot of early stage companies, that's a great resource. And so if your address is an incubator, that's totally fine.
Okay. And are there some examples you can share about how the Mass Life Sciences Center has worked with incubators in the past?
Oh, there's the Berkshire Innovation Center, BIC. That's one that sort of, it was before my time, and then it was during the pandemic, so I haven't gotten a chance to visit them and learn as much of it as I would like to. But incubators and innovation centers in general are entities that we support through multiple programs. We've certainly supported Berkshire Innovation Center. M2D2 is another group that we love to support wherever we can. In some cases, this involves sponsoring events they might have or offering award funds for their most promising companies or pitch competitions. We love to partner with entities, incubators for pitch competitions. Any connections we can provide to venture capital or angel funding. We're sort of, again, that matchmaking arm, but also, especially because incubators and innovation centers are sometimes the first conversation that small companies are having. Any information we can share about our programs, they're kind of they'll be our primary referral service, essentially, for companies that might look to take advantage of our funding. We're always interested in companies taking advantage of our programs as much as possible. We want to give away as much money as we can because that's why these programs exist. And again, because we see the return on investment in the long term. So incubators have been a key partner in terms of just referring companies to our funding programs in particular.
So Jean, to follow up with my question about promoting, have you also considered putting some type of ads on the billboard, and they can be somewhat region specific?
Yeah, I love that idea. Our funding for marketing communication is not great. Again, because we're a quasi-public agency, so it's all taxpayer dollars. So we are always prioritizing our programs themselves in terms of funding and trying to use as little on actual overhead and marketing communications. If you've ever been in the situation of having to make the case for it, it can be difficult. I, in my professional experience, have seen how marketing dollars do pay off if they're used strategically and in the right way and in the right places. So I do think there are areas, there are corridors, potentially, Greater Worcester in particular is an area that I would love to see more promotion and that I think is ripe for, honestly, within the next 5 to 10 years, just as robust a life sciences sector as Boston Cambridge. I really think it can be a second hub without too much forcing. So that's an area that I would love to advocate for a billboard. I think given our limited budget for marketing communication, because it's public dollars and because all of our money in our budget is authorized in a public way, it'll be a hard sell to put too much into traditional marketing like that when we've been able to get so much sort of like free press through our virtual events and through our existing partners. But it's definitely something that our marketing communications team has talked about. We have a new CEO, in case you aren't aware. His name is Ken Turner. He's awesome. So it's actually been a really fun time to sort of reevaluate all the things we're doing, how effective each initiative might be. And so what I particularly appreciate about Ken is that he's one of those, no idea is a bad idea until we've like talked it through. So like present anything. The worst we can all do is say no to it. And it's good to bring out as many new ideas as we can at this stage. So it's definitely the right time for those kind of ideas. And it's something that I agree with personally, especially if we're strategic about where it is.
Thank you.
So thanks for bringing it up.
Jean, could you talk a little bit more about how new employers coming to Massachusetts are engaging with the universities to recruit talent, both the internship program that you mentioned, but then also in terms of hiring?
Yeah, certainly. So the internship program is a great path for actual employees to start as interns and become long-term employees of that company. The data science program is a particularly good window into that, I think, because our data science funding program is essentially $750,000. That's the grant amount generally. And that money all goes to the nonprofit, so the university or the hospital or what have you. And that is incentivizing the solving of whatever that data science problem is, the answering of whatever that challenging data science question is. So that pays for data sets, that pays for the research, but the company itself is the one that hires the data scientists and trains them. And so then that data scientist, in partnership with the nonprofit, again, the university or the hospital, is the one actually doing the work and invested in solving the problem. But our funding is paying for the logistics, the equipment, the data sets themselves, biobank access, there are any number of complex data problems that I wasn't even aware of that it turns out can be really expensive to solve. So from a data science perspective, particularly, we've seen that the partnerships with the universities are a really great way to make sure that the investments we make in solving those data problems can then serve the public. So those public data sets, if funded by us, need to be made available to the public, which is pretty cool. So it's a way of making sure that the company is getting a lot of value out of our investment because they've been able to solve this challenging data science problem using our investment, but also that it's sort of motivated them to hire the data scientist and make sure that they have everything they need and the partnerships they need and access to that data. So it's really about incentivizing the company itself to make the hire, but then any way that we can support that position, support the equipment they need, the information they need, the data they need, using those universities and hospitals, that's usually the way that the relationship works. And that's the way that we've sort of seen it find the most success, rather than simply having a grant to hire a person, and then when the grant goes away, the person goes away. But making sure that the company is the one sort of making that investment to start out. Somewhat related to that, I'm seeing a question in the chat about the Next Gen initiative for women founders. Any women-owned companies, women-run companies is definitely another focus for us in any application. That's related to, because any women data scientists, any hiring that any company is doing of interns, we encourage them to hire women and also people of color where possible. So the Next Gen initiative in particular is really targeted at that leadership level, where if it's a women-run company coming into Massachusetts or starting in Massachusetts, there's this really great network of other women founders and professional development opportunities that we offer that I think has really helped a lot, and that we've gotten a lot out of personally, just seeing those connections be made and sort of being included as these women-run companies, women-founded companies continue to grow in Massachusetts. So I do feel like if you're in that position, a women-run company or a woman at the head of a life science company, do reach out. We have a really great program manager of this, Annie. She's very passionate about this, and I think we've heard a lot from women founders that as you try to grow a company, it can become more challenging as you're looking to hire and expand your business without the sort of professional development support and network that sometimes comes automatically in some other spaces. So it's sort of, we're attempting to have that as a plug and play. If you're a women-run company, if you're a woman founder, you have this whole, again, I can't avoid the word ecosystem of fellow colleagues and collaborators who are also women who understand the challenges in the space, who are there to connect you with that capital. We have some really great female venture capitalist connections that we have that are always looking for new ideas, particularly from women-run companies. So it's just a way that we feel like by diversifying the industry itself from that perspective, there's a lot to gain, even just from a pragmatic perspective. It's not just because it's the right thing to include these people, it's 50% of the population that isn't being activated and included as much as they could be in STEM careers in general. And that if we can promote more of them to leadership positions and make sure they have the tools they need to succeed in those positions and the resources and the funding, then it just builds a better system for all of us, particularly here in the Commonwealth, where we have all those resources that could contribute a lot to the equity and access that we'd love to see.
Okay. Great. So we're at about time. Thank you very much for joining us today, Jean. We really appreciate you making the time.
Yeah, it was my pleasure. And don't hesitate to reach out if you have other questions or suggestions. I've written down the billboard suggestion, at least. I love it. Or anything else you would need from other entities in Team Massachusetts, I'm happy to connect you.
Great information, Jean. Thank you so much.
Thank you all for joining us today. We hope you found this presentation informative. Please watch our website for future webinars that we're hosting at actionnewengland.org. Thank you, everyone. Have a nice day.